Hi, we're Richard and Jaci Mun-Gavin, and we are so grateful that you have taken the time to invest in your parenting journey.
We believe in parenting with purpose and with vision for your children, and so we hope you find this session helpful. This session is about the value of routine and developing a habit of obedience in our children. I'm sure you prick up your ears at that. It sounds delightful to have children
Absolutely.
have obedience as a habit. So we're going to start off with just chatting a little bit more about proper authority and what it looks like in our home, because that leads us into the habit of obedience. So proper authority is compassionate. It can be compassionate because we are understanding, we're in the same boat with our children. We also have to listen to the rules of the land and the laws that God has put in place for us. And so we can be sympathetic. We can say to our children, "Oh, is this really difficult not to get angry in the situation? I understand."
Yeah.
Or, "Is it hard not to take sugar from the cupboard when I'm not looking? How can I help you? Would you like me to put the sugar higher up? Or how can I help you to find this easier?" We can be compassionate about it.
Yeah. I think another aspect of just understanding authority and wanting obedience from our children is consistency. Just that we would not blow hot and cold, not blow with the wind, not choose one day to say one thing and then the very same circumstance the next day, but it's a different outcome for us. And so within our authority, we have to display consistency, that we are constantly the parents. We're not absolving or abdicating the one day and then taking hold of it the next day, not making our children have to choose as to whether their parents are doing a good job with their authority or are inconsistent in what they're doing.
Absolutely, because it's not about our will, we get to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
And the thing about consistent authority is that it also needs to be omnipresent or omniscient, a little bit like you're representing God here. And so as parents, we need to not be able to be hoodwinked. You know when it's been quiet for too long, what is going on? And so I think, especially as our kids are growing up, as they're learning what proper authority is, it's good for them to have a sense that somewhere mom and dad are always watching, that eyes in the back of the head that we joke. And this often happens when our kids are playing around the back of the house, but they don't realize that the back of the house has windows that lead right into our bedroom still. We have windows on both sides. And so they'll often be they think they've gone out the front door all the way around, and they are totally hidden. And then I'll call out the window, "What are you doing there?" And so just that idea of being omniscient, omnipresent with our children at all times is important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to be trusting. We don't want to be controlling parents and are micromanaging everything. Proper authority doesn't look like that, because proper authority is, you know, and I know that I have authority right now. And so even if you're in another room, I can hear what the kids are doing, and they have the sense that actually mom or dad is watching or is listening. And so we just wait and we give them a chance to correct their behavior themselves. How often are they playing and they say something and then they look up, and there you are, just quietly omnipresent or omniscient, just seeing everything, hearing everything. And there's almost a sense of intentional neglect that is helpful with proper authority. You don't have to micromanage. Your presence is enough.
Yes. Yeah, so I think with authority and presence, another aspect for us to understand is that authority never has to be aggressive. True authority is weighty enough.
Exactly.
We don't have to prove our authority through heavy-handedness or heavy words, etc. And so strength in authority is intimidating enough.
Yeah, and also because authority is imputed to us, we're doing it as servants. We don't have to ever abuse. We can't abuse our authority. We can't use it for our own gain. Autocracy can be manipulated, because if you're an autocratic leader, if you've taken rulership upon yourself, a little bit like a tyrant, you get to change the laws as you decide, then that kind of rulership, if you look throughout history, tyrannical leaders are overthrown by tyrannical leaders.
Yeah.
And so if there is a little tyrant in your house, then you might want to ask which tyrant has this tyrant overthrown? So if we are authoritative and authorized, there is a weightiness. But if we're autocratic and arbitrary and do make decisions at our will, you can expect your children, perhaps not when they're toddlers, depending on how strong your personality is, but certainly when they become teenagers, they will overthrow autocratic leadership.
Yeah.
One of the main reasons for teenagers kicking out against their parents is a realization that their parents have had no integrity, they have had no consistency or congruency between who they are and what they are asking their children to be. And so that authorized and authoritative leadership and parenting is what is key.
Yeah, I think that that kind of ties in very nicely with the next point on our list in terms of authority is neither being harsh or indulgent. Particularly when our kids become teenagers and they start to be able to weigh for themselves who we are as people, as parents. And so that congruency, that consistency. And so again, we don't get to be harsh or indulgent in our parenting.
So harshness would look like, if you're an autocratic leader, you're quite harsh. You don't want anybody to change your rules. But if you're an authorized leader and a child comes up to you and wants to change your opinion on something, you don't have to be harsh. You can actually say, well, no, okay, let me listen. No, sure, that's fine. And yet, if they're asking on a matter that is right and wrong, a matter where you have been given authority to lead your child in this area, then you are completely immovable. You won't be changed on those matters. So if your child is asking to overeat or is asking to get away with something that they shouldn't, that is actually a matter of right and wrong, you're immovable. You can't be changed around screen times or around what they're allowed to watch or around the kind of friends, what they're doing with their friends. You say, I'm sorry, I don't have the right to be moved on this issue. But when it's not an issue of right and wrong, then we can be quite lenient, actually. Yes, we can be those who say yes as often as possible.
I think one of the areas that you've been really helpful in, so we obviously agree as parents, as we move into this routine and habit of obedience, is training obedience in our children. And one of the things that has been a real phrase for us is developing a disposition of obedience. And you have done particularly well in representing us as parents to our children. So let's maybe just talk a little bit around obedience as a disposition.
Yes, so before we talk about obedience as a habit, we actually want to make sure, we want to check our children's hearts. Do they have a disposition of obedience? Are they ready to be differential and to be cooperative, to be amenable? Do they want to please? And the reason why I think this is a good place to start is because if that is not the case, then we're wanting to look at our children's hearts and actually shepherd their hearts and look at our own and ask ourselves, is our authority imputed? Or are we maybe being those tyrants and our children are kicking back against us because they have, again, just like they have an inherent disposition of obedience towards proper authority, they also have an inherent position of a kickback against tyrannical authority. And so they will not be obedient. They are born for freedom. It's been put into their hearts. And so we want to look at different issues that they might have and even seek professional help. One or two of our adopted children, we only have 2 adopted children. There's issues of trust, and sometimes there's a real issue, a real reason why their disposition is not one of obedience. So I would say start off by looking at the disposition when assessing yourself as a parent, and then assessing your child's heart and saying, do we need help in this area, or do we need a professional?
I think it's so key to us and or key to our parenting that we want our children to be obedient because we believe it will lead them to life and fruitfulness and the responsibility we have as parents to lead them in their life. But again, you're going to be constantly fighting a habit of obedience if a disposition is not towards that. And so that's why we have put this as a first key, that possibly even before we're expecting a habit of obedience, we really start working on that disposition within our children and coaching them and teaching them and the reasons why and for all the things that you have already said.
And then we're wanting to work on the habit. And so habit training, we know, is incredibly helpful. It's helpful for our routines. You're great at this. You're always helping us to get onto our routines.
I think so. One of the things that I've had the privilege of being mentored in and learning with the responsibility of leading a people in an organization is this thing called decision fatigue. And I think as parents, I know, we get tested to the end with our kids asking, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And so we suffer from decision fatigue, but also our children. I think some of the often most overlooked aspect within our kids when they start to play up, whatever, is we're asking them to make too many decisions for themselves, and they get decision fatigue. They don't have a grid for making calls. And so actually one of our responsibilities as parents is that we would have habits, so that it's not a question that always has to be answered. So we can be better parents, as well as our children being better children, because they understand what needs to take place when. And so that would have effect on bedtimes and meal times and how we expect them to deal with their clothes when they have a bath or a shower at the end of the day. All of these little things shouldn't be a wrestle every single day. It's habits training, which just it lessens decision fatigue, which actually allows better life to flow.
I think a great example, most parents would have experienced this when their kids are very young, is if you are, in our country, we have to strap our children into a car seat. If you have ever, when your child was a older baby or toddler, allowed them to get away with it because you were just going down the road, I'm sure that if you allowed them not to sit in their car seat one time, it then took you another 3 weeks of fighting to get them back into their car seats without a fight.
Yes.
Whereas when you strap them in every single time they get in their car, it takes away this decision fatigue.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we're suggesting around obedience. And I do think this is an area where we have actually succeeded well with our children. Yeah. And it has surprised people sometimes when they come into our home. Our kids don't argue with us because we have been consistent. And I know that might seem shocking and unattainable to you, but it really is a beautiful thing when you have trained your children in obedience. So it requires consistency from us, and it's not easy. Look, I've been that mom lying with my pregnant tummy on the bed, exhausted. You hear them fighting next door. You know you should get up and deal with it, but you're just not in the mood. You let them get away with it that one time, and you have the 3 weeks of fight. And so what I'm suggesting in this point is that actually we need to be consistent in our habit training. And we would actually do this around the dinner table and train them beforehand, what obedience looks like.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned something there which I know we have implemented, which has been really helpful in our parenting around this. But you said our kids are not argumentative back to us. And that may sound like we are tyrannical rulers, everything that we've been speaking against in all the previous sessions, but it's not that. And I think the way you explain it, the way that we have taught our kids is really helpful, just in understanding the disposition which leads to a habit of, where our children can still have expression and opinion. They're not without development and their own ideas, but yet the disposition and the habit lead them to a particular thing. So maybe just explain that.
Yeah, so actually that would be moving on to our fourth point.
Oh, okay.
It's good. Let's do it now. Is that we want to have reasonable expectations of our children. We want obedience to be reasonable. And so we need to know our children well, but we also need to command very sparingly. And so we don't give commands all the time. And that is why we can be consistent when in this area, you may not get away with it. So in the example I was using with the pregnant tummy, the kiddies were fighting and speaking to each other poorly. That is never ever allowed in the home. You're not allowed to speak to each other badly. And so I had to get up and go and deal with it and be consistent. But in other areas, our kids are able to have an opinion. And so because we command very sparingly, so again, I'm using examples because I think it helps to understand the theory. If you want your child to put a jersey on, but you're not going to insist that they put a jersey on if they say no. So then don't give a command. Don't say, go and get your jersey. No. Oh, fine. Because then it sounds like you are changing your mind, but actually it was never a command in the first place. So let your little kiddies, especially as they're young and learning language, hear the difference in the words you use and your tone of voice when you are making a suggestion and when you're giving a command. So it sounds different to say, it's cold. I think it would be good for you to go and put on your jersey, as opposed to go and put on your jersey. So I'm talking about complete obedience to the go and put on your jersey. Yeah. They can hear in your tone of voice, they can hear in the words that you're using that this is not a suggestion, this is a command.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really helpful. It may sound really subtle, but I think it has massive consequences, even in the way, so if we step out of parenting for a little while, even in the way that we relate with people. When we give each other commands, it's like, well, I don't know that I'm going to hold to that. What's going to happen if I don't hold to that? But if you kind of say, hey, listen, I've been outside. I know it's cold outside. You might want to take a jacket, but it's all yours. It still gives the freedom of choice to your child.
Exactly.
And I think that's really helpful in continuing to build a relationship of trust and build those things. And so with reasonable expectations, and then linked in with obedience as a habit, I was referencing the yes mom, the yes mom thing, and so I think it's helpful that when we look at obedience as a disposition, obedience as a habit, and then reasonable expectations in terms of what we ask, I think with all of that, one of the things that we have trained our kids in is to say you can have an opinion, but your immediate response needs to be yes.
Exactly.
We are responding to the authority that God has put in you as our parents. And so we're saying yes to you. May you explain why. Can you present a vision of why? We've spoken around leadership and vision and why we should do certain things. And I think that's helpful. I think that is human interaction. And so our commands should be really sparing.
Are we not looking to raise children that don't think for themselves? But I think that society has then gone all the way to children who don't understand obedience to proper authority. So you want to get the balance right. You want to be able to present them all the time with what is wisdom, what are God's laws, what are we working towards, so that they understand that. However, if I give a command, this is what I'm expecting. And so we would even train that around the dining room table and practice it. And in a moment of lightheartedness, I would say, okay, Dad's going to give a command, and Dad will say, drop a pencil, and say, pick it up. And we would show them that obedience has to be not only doing the thing that you've been asked to do, but it also needs to be immediate, and it also needs to be cheerful.
Yes.
That all three of these things are included in obedience. It's a yes mom, yes dad, but it's also immediate and cheerful. And so we'd say, okay, now do the same thing, do what Daddy says, but this time do it with a grumpy attitude, or this time do it slowly. And it's silly, but it helps them to know exactly what's expected of them. And so then in the heat of the moment, you can say, excuse me, immediate and cheerful obedience, and they can understand.
Yeah, I think we've got a phrase in our house which our kids will say to us and understand, that delayed obedience is disobedience. And so just around the consistency of authority helps to remove unhelpful habits or shoddy habits.
Yes.
So again, when we are consistent, it helps our children to respond obediently. When we are inconsistent, they don't know what they're lining up to. Yesterday we said this, today we said this, the rules seem to change. And so we want to help them be obedient. So summarizing the session?
Yeah. I think the big takeaway for parents today would be around your consistency and the kindness of habit training. It is not kind to say, you know what, I've been training this child to close the door for the last 3 weeks. You've done your 21 days of habit training, you've worked on this habit, and now they've just left the door open. But you know what, they've done so well, let me let them get away with it. It's not kind. It's not kind to let somebody break their habit. So I know it's exhausting, I know that it's tiring, but it's one of those things that when you put in good habits, just like if you put in good eating habits in your own life, good exercise habits, good whatever it is, if you want that thing in your life, you need to turn it into a habit so that you don't have to decide each time. And so let's give our children the gift of the habit of obedience, and then just once they've got it, don't let it go, and it will be far easier. I promise you, it's the hard work in the beginning for a far easier and peaceful home when our children understand habit as an obedience, obedience as a habit.
Hope this session's been helpful.